Hello everyone, welcome back to Touch the Fire Twice. I'm Joshua, and I'm here today to do an in-depth sniff review of 3 candles from Bath & Body Works, part of the Stranger Things Drop 2 Netflix collaboration. But first, if you're new to Touch the Fire Twice, welcome. My mission here is to share my love and passion for fine home fragrance as an enthusiast, an educator, a reviewer, to inspire you to increase your own fragrance knowledge and understanding, ultimately enhancing the scent memories that you create. If you want to learn more about what I do, why I do it, and how I do it, you can check out my website at TouchTheFireTwice.com, and please do give me a follow over on Instagram, also at TouchTheFireTwice. In July of 2024, Bath & Body Works collaborated with Netflix and Stranger Things for the first drop, which you can see my review here if you've not watched that already. And in August of 2024, they had the second drop, of which there are 3 candles. I have them all here today to give my first impression, and I'd call it sort of an in-depth sniff and review, because though I have not burned them, they're not a post-burn review, I am going to go deep into it, give you my overall sense of the fragrance, what I get from it. And if you're not familiar with some of my more fine fragrance or luxury candle reviews, I often go deep into a list of 8, 10, 12 notes and give you my overall impression of the fragrance itself all put together, but then going into each of the notes to say, okay, let's learn about what is patchouli, what is cardamom, what is cedarwood, what is galbanum, what is orris, all these different fragrance notes, these botanicals, these roots, these resins, these flowers, to understand specifically what they are, what they smell like, and how they work in a fragrance, so that we get to know what we like and what we don't like, whether you're doing a purchase online of something you haven't sniffed, or just to really know what your preferences are. And so I think there's a unique opportunity with these 3 specifically, because there are some notes in there that are not as common as some other notes that we see at Bath & Body Works. And so I'm gonna actually go through, give my in-depth sniff review, and talk through the 3 or 4 notes of each of those in my sort of traditional manner that I do with the other reviews that are deep dives into the science side of fine fragrance. But first, let's talk about the overall drop, the candles themselves. Of course, the first 4 were the fun, foodie ones, and now we've got the darker, more mysterious side of things. So we have a creature, we have a place, and then not necessarily dark, but a leather jacket. So these are the certainly conceptual, non-foodie fragrances in this drop. First, I want to start with the upside down. Notes on the upside down: mossy stone, smoky birch tree, and eerie fog. So we're getting 2 legitimate, traditional, frankly, notes from fine fragrance. And the third one is conceptual and could mean many things. An accord created based on eerie fog, so you're gonna think something that may be damp and dark and mysterious, but what are the synthetic and perhaps natural, but mostly synthetic chemicals, fragrances, notes that go into that? We'll dig into that a little bit, but first let me just get my nose on it. It's very intriguing to me. It is, at once, it is sort of wet, almost dank forest-like, but not so much earthy and not dry. There's a freshness and almost a brightness to this. It's a really juxtaposition, because it does feel like a damp forest, but there's a true bright freshness that I'm not entirely sure what that is. It really is like, it's sharp. There's an edge of sweetness to it, a bit of almost a powdery aspect. I feel like there's got to be some sort of kind of dried citrus in here, almost like an herbal citrus, like a green citrus. And this is going to sound very strange before I dig into the notes here. There's something about this, the citrus or the powdery aspect, that reminds me of some sort of candy or confection, and I can't label it. This is not a gourmand confectionery candle by any means. It really does have that moss and smoky birch in here, but there's an edge to, frankly, is it like a, well, now I may convince myself not to like it. Almost like a cleaner, like a Fabuloso or some sort of cleaner in there. There's a sharpness to this that I almost was thinking like, this is a weird one, but if you're familiar with Zicam, you know, those zinc rapid melt tablets that you take at the first sign of a cold that are homeopathic and supposed to prevent the cold from replicating and reduce your symptoms. Those rapid melt tablets are chalky, a little bit metallic, and have a dried citrus, almost citric acid flavor to them. And I get something like that in here, as if you had, let's say, like a citrus drink powder. So think of, you know, Tang or something like that, where you've got a powdered drink mix, like a Kool-Aid, but it's got like the crunchy sugar, citric acid, sour crystals in it as well. I'm going way left of what's actually on the label here telling you that, but that's what I'm getting. So please let me know if you smell that sort of tart, citrusy, kind of crunchy, dried citrus aspect to this, because I get a lot of that. Also with that though, I do get, as they say, the mossy stone. So if we're thinking of mossy stone, so there could be some actual mineral elements in here, like that sort of wet rock or slate, similar to what you see in a lot of wines. Like a white wine may have almost like you're licking a wet slate rock, depending on what the grapes were grown in. There could be that sort of stone element to this, but primarily mossy stone, we're thinking of moss. And when it comes to fine fragrance, most moss is oak moss, which is a tightly curled plant, and it's a lichen that grows on oak trees. It can be from green to black, whether it is dried or damp. And the fragrance really does kind of match what we're getting here, which is earthy, woody, sensual with hints of musk, some amber, a really strong earthy, damp aroma. Think of if you're walking through a forest and there are damp, mossy tree trunks, maybe some fallen trees that are rotting, stones, and the moss-covered branches on the ground. There can be dryness to moss, like a crisp bark or almost a leathery aspect, as well as those hints of a muskiness or a resinous amber. But oak moss can also be green and slightly bright, depending again if we're getting a dried or damp green or black oak moss. Then the next note is smoky birch tree. Now, birch tree on its own is not typically a smoky fragrance. The wood itself has a sappy green note, sometimes minty, refreshing wintergreen style wood. But birch tar, as they say smoky birch, so I'm thinking there's birch tar in this, but they maybe didn't want to say tar to turn people off. Birch tar is used to evoke a leathery fragrance. Warm, acrid, smoky, tarry, and above all, kind of a leathery aspect. The overall impression of a wood fire. And then finally, eerie fog. Hard to say what fog is. It's not necessarily going to be ozone like you get before a thunderstorm, or petrichor, which is the fragrance that we get after a rainstorm when we have the essential oils of plants, or the geosmin bacteria that is also thrown into the air from the earth. Not necessarily that, but I would say the fog really is that forest. It's cool, it's damp, it's dark. Overall, it makes this very strange and intriguing. Again, I do get some sweetness and some earthiness, dampness from both the moss and the smoky birch tar, but there's something incredibly citrusy, powdery, dried, sweet tart in this as well that is hard to place. Borderline almost holiday, but not quite. It's intriguing. I'm very curious to see what this will be like lit over time. This one was my favorite when I first sniffed, although TBD, because now I can't get my head out of that odd sort of powdered drink mix fragrance that I'm getting now on the top of it, which doesn't really fit for a forest, but very interesting nonetheless. Then we'll move over to perhaps my second favorite, the Demogorgon. And as you can see here, the, I believe, head or face of that creature, all around there embossed, with notes of black orchid petals, spicy cedarwood, and dark patchouli. Some intriguing notes there that I'm excited to dig into with you guys. This is sweet, bright actually, resinous. Man, I do like this one. This one leans sweet, I think, frankly, probably from the patchouli, because patchouli that is done not as a dried earthy patchouli, but a fresh green patchouli can have an herbal sweetness to it, sort of a fruity sweetness, the way that you get in wine or some dried fruits, like a concentrated sweetness almost. Not sugariness, but sweetness. There's a fine line between the two. But also, I think, simplistically, this seems to carry a pretty solid kind of red hot cinnamon, which I would like to believe and give them credit that is some of the herbal sweetness coming through from the patchouli, and even the resinous wet sweetness that you get from a camphoraceous cedarwood, especially saying spicy cedarwood. But it would be hard to argue with there being some sort of cinnamon in here. Frankly, more like a cassia cinnamon, a Chinese cinnamon, or what we think of more as kind of the red hot cinnamon versus the softer floral powdery bakery of a Ceylon true cinnamon from Mexico. And so I do think that may be part of this. Certainly that is one of those things where when you think that is a heavy hit of this, but there is more to it. I'm intrigued by the note of the black orchid. So there are actually 25,000 species of orchids. Some of them produce a rich, sweet, vanilla-like fragrance. Others can be more subtle and delicate. They can be fruity, floral, spicy, really a very wide range. And some can even be musky, exotic and floral, sweet and playful, musky and mysterious. This one, especially with the idea of the black orchid, I do believe is more the sultry, sensual side. I've never smelled one of those up close, but there could be a bit of a dark, sensual, sultry floral in here. And of course, spicy cedarwood. Now, cedarwood, I always say, one of my favorite base notes. It is my favorite wood fragrance overall. It's deep, dark, resinous, softly woody, earthy, sweet, can be spicy, camphoraceous, and cooling like pencil shavings or a cedarwood chest. And there are many types of cedars. I should do a full video on cedar at some point because I want to share and learn more about it myself as well. But there is a true cedar and there are juniper cedars. The juniper cedars can often take the place of a true cedar, but there are differences across them. The Northeast US is going to have northern white cedars, which is a softer, milder scent. Junipers in the cypress family, which are actually shrubs, could be the Virginia cedar or Texas cedar. But then when we get into the true cedar, which are members of the pine family, so if you've heard of cedar Atlas, Lebanon, Himalayan cedar, those are the most authentic and true cedars. And the true cedars can be described as warmer, woody, sweet, a warm cinnamon-like fragrance, and camphoraceous. So in that sense, perhaps we're getting in here, we'll never probably know if there truly is cinnamon fragrance oil, synthetic or natural, in here, but I would like to believe that maybe that cinnamon is actually coming from the, as they say, spicy cedarwood, a true cedar fragrance. And then finally, dark patchouli. So patchouli is strong, slightly sweet, herbaceous, spicy, and intoxicating. It can have a dark, woodsy, earthy, musky profile. And there are two unique distillation methods, the traditional Indonesian distillation and then the European or American distillation method, and they bring out different aspects of the fragrance. That traditional Indonesian patchouli is gonna have a floral sweetness, a rich root-like note, delicate earthiness, a bit swampy, kind of barnyard-like, but not musty. And then the European or American distillation method for patchouli is going to deliver a very sweet, rich, spicy, aromatic, herbaceous patchouli with an added fruity or wine-like sweetness, less of the woody, earthy notes that we traditionally think of with patchouli. So when it comes down to it, across the orchid petals, the cedarwood, and the patchouli, I do think some of that fruity, sweetness, spiciness that comes off, frankly, as a floral, because I do think there's that floral with the orchid, the sultry floral, and then there's like a cinnamon on top of there. I think that could just be a true cedar with an American or European distillation method patchouli, that fruity, wine-like sweetness, alongside the spicy, aromatic herbaceousness. I find this one really interesting. When I'm doing a side-by-side just of these two, since they are my tops, that mossy, sweet, admittedly, forest of the Upside Down, I can't get that dried, crunchy, like powdered tang out of my head though with this one. Please tell me if you smell something like that in there. We'll see what happens when I burn it. And then this one, which is camphoraceous, herbaceous, spicy sweetness with a little bit of a powdered floral from the black orchid. Very interesting, very different, and both smell quite unique for Bath & Body Works. And then finally, we have Eddie's leather jacket with notes of black leather, soft musk, and smoked suede. So getting my nose on it, this is the most obvious. You know what you're getting with this. You smelled similar fragrances at Bath & Body Works. They've had a number of leather-focused fragrances. There was the rosewood and leather. There was, I don't know if that was the exact name. There, of course, is the leather and brandy. The leathers in there and sort of the leathers in some of the, what they call the men's collection, are right in line. This is a traditional Bath & Body Works leather fragrance. But what does leather, or black leather in this case, look like in fine fragrance? So leather is not an essential oil that you can actually produce. It may be birch tar, which we talked about in that other candle, juniper, some aldehydes, or other synthetics designed to give that sort of skin-like fragrance. And then things like patchouli or black tea, tobacco leaves can also conjure up a leather-like note. And frankly, when it comes to ambers and different resins like labdanum, you can also get a leather aspect there. Soft musk, as I often say, musk really is a class of aromatic fragrances all its own, commonly used as a base note, originally extracted from the gland of a musk deer, though now there are plants and synthetics that give us the same musk odor. A musk is going to be an attractant, alluring, hypnotizing, animalic, maybe a little sweet, a little powdery, perhaps metallic, repulsive. Do you love it? Do you hate it? Somewhere in the middle, most likely. And then smoked suede. Suede, like leather, is not an oil on its own. It's going to be an accord or combination of other oils to give the idea of suede. And perfumers recreate that sort of soft, enveloping quality of suede, typically by using synthetic ingredients. And suede specifically is so much about the texture of that fragrance and trying to, I always say, a mood, moment, memory, space, place, or time. In this case, it's really evoking a physical touch feeling. You're going to have that comforting, soft, cocoon-like feeling, thanks to notes that are musky, woody, leathery, and velvety. What I think this also smells like There's something about this that reminds me a bit of the Bath & Body Works candle A Walk in the Woods from, I want to say 2022 and maybe 2023 as well. The notes on that were forest cedarwood, crisp patchouli, and dark peppercorns. And it had that sort of musky, fruity, a little bit sweet fragrance. It didn't lean really into leather so much, but it was woodsy and warm. And I get maybe 30-40% of that candle mixed with the traditional Bath & Body Works leather. So it's interesting. The leather is pretty powerful in this, which is not my favorite. I don't mind leather being in fragrances, but as the primary note, not always my bag. Rightly so, named Eddie's leather jacket. That should be the primary note in this, but this is my least favorite of the three. If you love leather fragrances, then this is seemingly a good one. So all that to say, those are the three candles from the second, perhaps final, drop of Stranger Things at Bath & Body Works. I do appreciate the effort they put into the designs and some really unique fragrances. At least two of them are quite different than things we've smelled before at Bath & Body Works, and it allows all of us to kind of stretch what we think is interesting and what we may actually enjoy. And so I would recommend go in with sort of an open nose, an open mind, ignoring the labels and the notes, frankly, as far as what they say it's supposed to evoke, because this could be marketed very, very differently when it comes to these sort of conceptual fragrances than what you see here. If this isn't your bag, try to, sniff without thinking what they are telling you for it to be, because frankly, Demogorgon could be a light, sweet, spicy floral that we could see in the springtime, frankly. So very interesting the way that they've made these work. Would love to hear more from the perfumers, but we know we really only get that when it comes to the collections where they're celebrating perfumers and their contributions. So that is it for this review. Let me know what you think of these, if you get similar or different notes from it, and what you think of this type of video where we go into the notes. If that's something you want to see more of, I'd love to hear your feedback. And until next time, take care.